Welcome into Always the Jags. First of all, I know it's been quite a long time since I last released an episode. I took last year's loss really, really hard. And like as a content creator, I know you can't just like stop, just because you get really disappointed. And it's gonna be hard to keep it going this year if we miss the playoffs again. And it's only gonna be more difficult this year with the Texans' emergence. So last year was just rough and it took a while for me to get over that. I did do a mock draft, but even that, like I still haven't posted about like the draft grades. And so it's really hard to grade things like especially right after the draft. But I'm kind of glad I'm doing it now in the preseason because we've had a chance to kind of look at some of these guys. And I think for the most part, my grades, I still feel like they hold up and I still feel like they were good choices all around. Like last year's draft, I feel like the Jaguars made poor decisions. In 2023, I think some of the choices, not coming away with Brian Branch and Darnell Washington when they were right there within your grasp, to me were huge errors because we still needed a slot guy this year. And Brenton Strange, Darnell Washington has proved to be a better blocker, which is something we knew before the draft. So anyway, let's get into this year's draft. And we're going to talk about what the Jaguars picked and what we've been seeing in the preseason and how that may have affected the grades that I already had posted. So first, round one, pick 23 was Brian Thomas Jr. Um, I think this was an A pick. I think it was, like I said, I still think cornerback is a big need for us. I don't know if I would have passed on, like, if it was me, because Mitchell and Arnold, I think, were still available at 17. But then for us to be able to trade down and still get Brian Thomas Jr. was a nice haul. I don't know if I would have traded down and passed up on Mitchell and Arnold. Because it's hard to make that choice when like Tyson Campbell is a number one corner when he's healthy and fully healthy. So like there are some players that can play when they're hurt and still make an impact. Tyson Campbell, when he's hurt, you can tell and he's not playing as well. He's not Amon-Ra St. Brown who played last year with like a torn labrum because he's like insane. I don't even know what's up with him. Still got 1,500 yards. Tyson Campbell's not that. If he's hurt, he's going to play poorly, even just a little bit. So that's why I felt like we kind of needed another corner. And that didn't necessarily mean that Tyson Campbell wouldn't be our cornerback one. It just means that, like, these guys are going to come in and they're going to compete because Tyson Campbell could be the best QB2 in the entire NFL. But when we're talking QB one, I mean, cornerback ones, it's a little bit different. But still, Brian Thomas was a great pick here based upon the way the draft played out. We did get two extra picks, a third and a fourth for next year, which is actually quite a nice haul in order to trade down. And Brian Thomas Jr., LSU has a history of their number two receivers becoming NFL stars. Justin Jefferson compared to Jamar Chase. I mean, like, let's remember he was the number two guy in LSU's offense. So I feel like picking a receiver from LSU who's known for his deep ball skills, I think he'll have just as good of a season as Calvin Ridley did last year. And I kind of like that our offense is kind of evolving. Like this year, I don't think it's going to be we're not really going to have a number one wide receiver. It's going to be more of a pick your poison. So whatever guy gets open, the defense is going to have, like when you have Tyreek Hill or Stephon Diggs, like, yeah, that keeps coordinators up at night, but they come up with a plan to try to take away that guy. And once you do that, the other guys usually don't cause you as much trouble. Or, taking away like Devontae Adams or something like that. So with us, if you decide to take away Brian Thomas Jr., well, Kirk and Davis are still going to hurt you. If you decide to take away Evan Ingram, well, now Thomas can hurt you as well. So it's going to kind of be like a pick your poison, spread the ball around. And I think we've seen that a lot in the offseason and in the preseason. And Brian Thomas Jr. made some phenomenal catches. One on the sidelines with Mac Jones as quarterback. And then he made another really nice deep ball contested catch from CJ Beathard. So I think he's gonna have a great season. And Jaguars fans needed to see that from him. So I'm glad Doug Peterson kept him in even when he took the ones out. And now it'll be exciting because we'll get to see him play with an entire half with the Falcons this Friday for the last preseason game until the season opener. So I think it's gonna be a good year, and I think he's gonna get a lot of work. And I think he's gonna be just as good as Calvin Ridley. Like I'm not upset that we lost Calvin Ridley in exchange for Brian Thomas Jr. because I think he can be just as good off the bat and he'll continue to get better. Like the thing with Calvin Ridley was like we were gonna have to pay him, and you don't really know if he's gonna get better. Like, like what if what we got from him last year, what if that was his peak? Like, and it would take a year to like adjust back to football. So there's always gonna be who probably was going to do better next year. But for Brian Thomas Jr., the potential is so much higher. And he's cost controlled for the next 4 or 5 years. So I think it was a good pick. I don't think we're gonna regret it. Yeah, and so that one's still an A, and after the preseason, it's still an A. Maason Smith, defensive tackle, great defensive tackle. Right now he's been playing really well in the preseason. He hasn't really been like wreaking havoc, you know what I mean? I would love to see him play more in the preseason. Like even if he takes the ones out, I would love to see more of Maason Smith in the with the twos and maybe even some of the threes, just on a couple of plays, just to see how he does, get him some confidence, playing against backup guys. But because right now he's making an impact, but we haven't felt it yet. But I think he's one of those guys that, like I said, barring injury, he could have been a first rounder. He just will need a little time to develop to get past that injury and really learn from some guys. So I think having him playing next to Eric Armstead gives us a very nice defensive line, and if that's able to help jumpstart his growth, it'll be um, a boon for us, and it'll kind of be like he can get there a little sooner playing next to Eric Armstead. So this pick is a B plus. I still liked it. My choice would have been a cornerback, but unfortunately, Kool-Aid McKinstry got sniped from us by the Saints, which didn't really see coming. I think we would have had to leapfrog the Texans if we really wanted to get a cornerback because they took Kamari Lassiter and he was kind of like a third, fourth round. So I think the Texans kind of reached for him. Kool-Aid McKinstry was the last of like those top tier cornerbacks who had the traits and the tape and everything to back it up, who could potentially be a day one starter. So like based upon need, I would have preferred if we had been able to get someone like him. And I think the Jaguars were prepared to potentially leap ahead of the Texans because we all know the Texans were looking for a second quarterback as well. I mean, cornerback. But the Saints got there before both of us. And I don't think the Jaguars were anticipating the Saints sniping up because they have Marshawn Lattimore, Paulson Adebo, like they have some great corners. So it's like I would never expect them to do that. So I think that's one of those times sometimes in the draft you get sniped. Saints saw like, oh hey, these teams have need cornerbacks. We really want Kool-Aid McKinstry. We're gonna leap up and get him. So if the Texans had gotten Kool-Aid McKinstry, I would have been upset. But because the Saints got them, like I said, there was nothing we could really do. I think Maason Smith is, I hate to say like consolation prize. I think he's gonna be good. But he kind of ends up being that consolation prize. And it opens up an interesting opportunity with us and the Saints, which I'll get into a little bit later. So now we're on the third round. So that pick is a B plus for Maason Smith. Third round, Jarrian Jones, cornerback, round 3, pick 90C. I give this one a C, because Jerry and Jones, like while we do need more bodies in our cornerback room, he seems like he's going to be playing the slot corner position. And to me, I mean, like you signed Darnell Savage, and he said he's going to play slot, and then you have Antonio Johnson, who's going to play safety, but he's also really good in the slot. And so now it's like you have three guys that could all play the slot, and you're spending a third round pick on a backup slot guy. It just feels like like we could have got someone like TJ Tampa. Like I would have much rather gotten someone like TJ Tampa, who is known for being a boundary corner. The Ravens ended up picking him a little bit later, but knowing he still was on the board, he's a guy that could step in and play and compete with Ronald Darby for that second job. I don't think he would have been worth a second round pick, but that would have been like competition. Jerry and Jones feels like he's going to be buried on the depth chart at least until Savage's contract is up. Now, maybe Jones will play really well and he'll be able to, overtake um, Savage's job for that role in the slot. But to me, we still have a bigger issue in the boundary because, like, when we signed Darnell Savage, I was kind of surprised because I thought Antonio Johnson was going to kind of become almost like our Kyle Hamilton, where like he'll play safety, and then when it's time to go into nickel, he'll move up into the slot, and then we'll slide Devon, I will slide either, and it could have been Andrew Wingard or someone like Darnell Savage will take that final safety spot next to Cisco out in the backfield since we released Rayshawn Jenkins. So it looks like that's not really what we're going to do. I think we're just going to keep Johnson out there, and Darnell Savage is just going to come in on those nickel downs. So then again, for Jerry and Jones, I'm like, I feel like I probably would have taken TJ Tampa as someone to develop because again, Johnson's going to be here for a while. And I think I would have wanted to develop another boundary corner, because we have some guys who can play well, but like Monteric Brown, Christian Braswell, we haven't seen enough from those guys to really be like, yeah, one of those guys can become our boundary corner too, besides Tyson Campbell. And like I said, what I really want is for Tyson Campbell to become the cornerback two and let someone else come in and be the cornerback one. So that's why this one gets a C. Hopefully, maybe Jones will prove me wrong. Love that we took a Florida State kid, at least that. But I think I just personally would have preferred an outside cornerback here based upon what we needed and based upon what was available. Because again, you want to take the best player available, but I don't necessarily think that TJ Tampa, I don't think that Jerry and Jones was better than TJ Champa. I don't think he was a better choice. So now we have round 4, offensive tackle, pick 114, where we took Javon Foster. This one I graded as an A because I think when I did my own mock drafts, I often ended up with Javon Foster, right? And this was like a good pick for him. I think he's a very sturdy offensive tackle. He needs some development. If Walker Little and Cam Robinson leave in the offseason, maybe he'll be able to take over. I mean, as a fourth rounder, we'll see. But he has left and right side flexibility, just like Anton Harrison, who can play the left and right side. So that means we can play him where he's more comfortable. And, we can see where Harrison ends up being more comfortable because he's done both. In the preseason, he had some good reps and he had some bad reps. I think he's a little bit better in the run game than he is in pass protection because whenever he was in, it seemed like they were getting pressure. But it seemed like there were a lot of big lanes opening up for Tank Bigsby. So that's why I kind of like that I did this grade after the preseason because, again, I really want to see some more of him because I think this was a very good pick. So I'm still going to leave it as an A. I do think it will take more time to develop than maybe anticipated. So hopefully next year, because Cam Robinson and Walker Little are both starting caliber tackles that will be free agents this offseason. So AKA we're going to lose both of them because we're probably not going to re-sign them. Unless we throw a franchise tag on Walker Little, which I wouldn't be opposed to for 1 year. Give Javon Foster another year to develop. But again, we're talking, this is only the beginning of the year. Javon Foster's got a long way to develop and maybe become our left tackle of the future. But for right now, I think this was a good spot for him. He's a great backup to have, potentially a great, I mean, Walker Little is our swing tackle, but gives us some more depth in a more developmental position right there. So next we have round 4, and here's where we took Jordan Jefferson, the nose tackle. I do not like this pick. I graded this one as a C minus. I think now, especially after watching the preseason, now this feels more like a D or closer to an, I'm not going to say an F, but it feels like a D. Like if I was to go in and change my original draft grades that I did in May, I would probably change this to a D because, again, you need to build your team in the trenches, right? But if you look at our offseason, we brought in Eric Armstead, we brought in, and we drafted Maason Smith really highly. So we invested in that defensive line, and we got guys like Roy Robertson Harris is still here. Devon Hamilton will be coming off of an injury. Jeremiah Ledbetter, some of those guys are more backup guys that they really shouldn't be starting. And we had to start some of them last year because of the injuries that we had along our defensive line and ineffective play. But I still don't think that you needed a nose tackle in Jordan Jefferson right here in this spot. I think, like, if it was me, I would have taken Tanner Bortolini, especially after watching the draft, after watching our preseason, because our interior offensive line still needs help and fortification and depth. We signed Mitch Morse in the offseason, which was a great move. Loved that move because I don't think Luke Fortner is going to cut it. But Tanner Bortolini has played every position on the line, and he's best at center. Like that's his position that he's really known for, but he's played every position along the line. So he provides a lot of flexibility. You could have drafted him, let him compete in camp, and he could have been either the backup center behind Mitch Morse. Maybe if he beats out Scherf or Cleveland for one of the guard spots, he could have been one of our starting guards, or he could have been our center of the future. He had a lot of options and a lot of versatility, and then the Colts got him just a couple of picks later. Jordan Jefferson is a guy that's probably not going to play this year. He may play next year. We'll see. But he had like 2.5 sacks, and he wasn't really good at stopping the run. I mean, I think he was better at stopping the run than people like know or like see as impacted, but I don't think it was worth enough when our own interior offensive line has questions beyond this year. Like, what are we going to do at center after Mitch Morse? Are we going to turn back to Luke Fortner? I'm like, I don't think you can turn back to Luke Fortner without having competition. So, like, if Mitch Morse is only good for this year and his contract is kind of like, it's like a 2 year kind of a band aid. So, like, maybe he'll be here for the next 2 years, but I don't think we're going to re up him unless he has a fantastic season. So, what are we going to do at center? Are we just going to be like, all right, Luke Fortner, go back out there? It's like, we've already know, like, you need to have competition for Luke Fortner. I'm not saying he shouldn't get a second chance, but he should be competing with a guy like Tanner Bortolini, who was regarded as one of the best centers and was still going to be available there on the fourth as a very sturdy guy who just needs a little time to develop. And not to mention, he provided depth and he could have potentially taken over one of those guard spots because, again, especially after watching the preseason, our offensive line is kind of offensive. Like, just the interior has a lot of worries for me, has a lot of worries. So I don't think that picking a nose tackle. We do need to stop the run. And watching the preseason, I did notice that it's kind of been an issue for us of stopping the run. So maybe that's something we'll address with a trade coming up soon. And again, I'm not sure if that was the ones who weren't really as good at it or the twos. But I think we were getting run on because in the Chiefs game, we were getting run on, and that was our number one defense out there. And Isaiah Pacheco was just, there were holes everywhere. Now, the Chiefs have a great offensive line, but still, it seemed like we couldn't stop the run to save our lives. And that trend continued against the who we played last week. I can't think of who we played last week. But that trend, oh, Buccaneers. That trend continued against the Buccaneers. So maybe we need a nose tackle more than I realize, but I still think I would have rather went center here and maybe picked like a more developmental nose tackle. I think center is still the more immediate need that you should spend your higher draft capital on. Um, Next, round five, we have DeAndre Prince, cornerback, round five. And I'm like, this one feels more like a special teams pick because like he's lean and fast and he can play as a boundary corner. You know, he made some nice plays in the preseason and then he also got beat in the preseason. But this pick I ranked as a D because I feel like he's like I don't see how he's gonna help us this year or make that much of an impact. Like there's this guy Javon Solomon who was available in the draft, and he had 16 sacks last year. Now the knock on Javon Solomon is he's not good against the run, which is fair. If you're not good against the run and you're a defensive end, that's gonna lower your stack by a lot. 16 sacks is a lot. You can't just ignore that. So to me, in this spot, I would have picked Javon Solomon, and having him, I think, would have made a big difference for our third pass rusher. And again, because we still needed a cornerback, that's what kind of makes all of this a little bit different. Like in a perfect world, probably would have been able to get that cornerback pick in the second round, like Kool-Aid McKinstry, if we weren't sniped by the Saints. And then maybe in the third round, picked up Maason Smith instead of Jerry Jones. And then in the fourth round, Javon Foster. And then two picks after that would have been Tanner Bortolini. And this pick right here would have been Javon Solomon, and he would have competed for against Gibson, who we kind of signed as our third pass rusher, to be that third pass rusher. Because again, all we need is some solid pass rush. We don't need, I mean, we do need guys that can stop the run, nose tackles inside. But the whole purpose of this guy would be if we get them in third and long in obvious passing situations, we're going to slide Trayvon Walker inside and let Javon Solomon just do his thing on the outside. And now you got to defend against Josh Allen, Eric Armstead, and Trayvon Walker, who's been known to completely obliterate guards. So, like, having someone who can come in and let Trayvon Walker play inside would be an amazing boon to our defense. And I think he could have lined up on the right side and just went to town. You know what I mean? So, to me, that was a big miss to not be able to snatch him up because he's a guy that could have made an impact this year and still developed. I don't think he would ever take over one of those starting jobs from Josh Allen or Trayvon Walker until he gets his run stopping ability much better. Because again, Trayvon Walker and Josh Allen are some of the best edge players that can set the edge against the run. Like they're tremendous again it. But that's why teams always run up the middle against us because they know Trayvon Walker and Josh Allen are really good at setting the edge. So, um, yeah, I would have went with Javon Solomon here. Of course, he went a little bit later to the Bills, so it was kind of too late after that. But this pick kind of baffles me because I don't see where DeAndre Prince is going to end up fitting in. It just kind of feels like more competition for our cornerback room, and that competition doesn't appear to like. I feel like he's going to end up on special teams, and this is a fifth round pick, and you could have got a rotational pass rusher for a fifth round pick instead of a guy who's going to be, um, trying to make the roster. Like he might not even make our roster of cornerbacks because we have a lot of guys, but no one's been really separating themselves. You know what I mean? We don't have enough guys who can really separate themselves from the pack. So it feels like trying to catch lightning in a bottle here, and it's like you could have went with a more established someone who did it in college and really established what they can do, and Javon Solomon can pass rush. So I think this is more like a pick of D, mainly because of who we could have gotten rather than like who we did get, but that's part of the grading process. So um Keelan, so next we have round 5, our running back Keelan Robinson. This one I have as a B minus, because he's a solid change of pace guy, who can return for Travis and or play special teams. Sorry, he can return kicks, and we're gonna have two kickoff returners, and he can play special teams. However, after watching those preseason games and watching how well Parker Washington returned kicks, and we signed Devin Duvernay, who is a great signing, and watching Tank Bigsby, like Tank Bigsby has really stepped it up. If Tank Bigsby and Parker Washington can continue their play into the regular season, that is going to be a huge boon on the 2023 draft and really help our team in situations because again, when Kirk went down, our offense was lost. But if Parker Washington can step into Kirk's place and the offense not miss a beat, that gives us the kind of depth that we really need. Because if a guy like Gabe Davis goes down or something like that, if we know that Parker Washington can step in and the offense won't mess up, again, our entire season was lost last year after Christian Kirk went down. You look at it like where did the wheels fall off for the Jags? Christian Kirk got hurt in the Saints game, you know, and that was it wasn't even no, he got hurt in the Browns game. We could have even potentially won the Browns game if Kirk didn't get hurt. And he wasn't, we didn't realize how integral he was, but he's just been that safety valve for Trevor and he gets open. And so in the preseason, Parker Washington has been doing a great job of getting open, and Tank Bigsby has been just smashing his way, smashing his way onto the roster. Like I think he's a lock for running back 2 on the roster, and he might even compete for running back 1 depending on the situation. Because like Travis Etienne grades out really well as a scat back, but he's still our top running back. But I think Tank Bigsby, especially for those 3rd and 1 hammering situations, Tank Bigsby has really, really made a name for himself. So Keelan Robinson feels more like a kind of a luxury pick, is more of like a return guy here, round 5. And I did kind of want them to go running back here. But I think I wouldn't have mind if we addressed the kicker position at this spot. We did address kicker a little bit later, but I think because again, the top kicker in the draft was I think it was either Will Levis or Will Richard and Andrew Mevis, maybe one of those two guys, and they ended up going in the 5th or early in the 6th round, from the Rams and the Vikings. So Keelan Robinson wasn't a bad pick. Right now I have it as a B. He ended up getting injured, so he's probably going to be on injured reserve, which I think is for the best because our running back roster, a lot of guys really showed out, and I think Tank Bigsby, um, is going to make the roster for sure. Dearness Johnson, I think he didn't do as much as some of the other guys, but I think he's done enough to bring him on the roster. And I think Jackson has been a thumper, and he's going to make it onto the roster as well. So I think Keelan Robinson is probably going to go on injured reserve. And then I don't know if they're going to assign him to the practice squad or what after that. It's probably going to end up being a wash here for him because he's been hurt all camp, so we probably won't get a good grade on him. So I'll leave it as a B because again, you need two returners, and I don't think we knew Parker Washington was going to be so good at returning until this year. Like watching that first return he had, like that he had that quick stop and start, which is what you really need. Like he was making guys miss in the open field. And so, because sometimes returning kicks is not all about straight line speed, it can be about can you stop and start, stop and start, stop and start. And he has that and he displayed that in that kickoff return. Like that wasn't just, oh yeah, the blockers cleared up in a whole path. Like he was making guys miss, he was making them miss tackles, and that's why he went so far. And that's what makes it really exciting to see like all this development from him. So, I use this pick to talk more about Parker Washington and Tank Bigsby. But Keelan Robinson, I have it rated as a B, so I'll probably just leave it there because again, we won't really get a good assessment on him until later. Like I said, I think it was still a good pick. However, I think I would have went kicker here. Now, when we go to the sixth round, the reason why I can still leave it as a B is because we ended up picking Cam Little in the sixth round at pick 212 because we got Cam Little. And Will Reichert, oh, Reichert, that's what his name was. Will Reichert ended up going to the Vikings. And so this grade right now, I have it as a B plus. I would probably change it to an A, based upon Cam Little's performance in the preseason because he's hit every kick he's been asked to hit. And he's hit some of the kicks that Brandon McManus was missing. So he'd be giving us that security that we were missing. And like his camp was so good that we released the other kickers that were going to compete with him. Now, to me, this pick, like right now, I have it as a B plus. And if he becomes the best kicker in this draft, then it will be an A. But based upon who was coming out, like I said, Will Reichard was kind of the consensus top kicker. And I think I would have picked him in the fifth round just to make sure that we get him, rather than waiting to the second to get potentially the third best kicker. Now, of course, if Cam Little just becomes a great kicker and hits everything that we need, and so like we don't have to worry about if we're at, if it's a 40-yard field goal try, do we need to punt or do we need to go for it on fourth down? We know, hey, we can get 3 points here. Like, once you cross a certain point in the field, based upon your kicker, like if you have Justin Tucker, you already know you got 3 points. So that completely changes your playbook and opens it up, and teams can't expect what you're going to do. So hopefully this will solve our kicking woes that we've had all the way back to the days of Josh Lambo. My gosh. So far in the preseason, Cam Little's been nothing but clutch. So we'll see if it carries over into the regular season. I think it will. And I think this pick will end up being, really good, really good. Um, last we have Miles Cole. And it's really hard I think he made some plays. He's a defensive end. I think he made some plays. Round 7, we picked him, pick number 232. To me, this is probably where I would have taken that nose tackle. I don't know if Jordan Jefferson would have been still available here. But if it was up to me, this is where I would have, like, if I had gotten Javon Solomon and Tanner Bortolini where I wanted them, and Jordan Jefferson was still available in round 7, I would have picked him right here, and that would have been a fantastic draft. Like I said, it'll be an uphill battle for him to make the team, that's for sure. He made some nice plays in the preseason. But again, he didn't have 16 sacks last year. Like, I'm gonna be talking about Javon Solomon until I die. Because again, some of those sacks, can come from other situations, like, being in the right place at the right time, but you got 16 of them. So that's a lot of times to be in the right place at the right time. So, because someone had commented on it about, why I liked Javon Solomon so much. So he said, and draft grades are kind of pointless overall. But for right now, this is where they're at. So I think overall, I think I think this will look back as like a very solid draft class. We've already got some guys who have proven that they're going to be starters and contributors in Brian Thomas Jr., Maason Smith. Getting a starting kicker out of the 6th round is great value in any draft. And like I said, just with a couple of different moves, I think we could have set ourselves up really well for the future. But again, overall, I think this class is much stronger than last year's class. Last year's class, I still feel like early rounds we had a chance to really, really transform our defense. Transform or pick from. I feel like last year we picked from a position of um trying to take best player available, but at the same time not really. Like we picked as if we already were winners, and it's like no, we still have some very clear holes that we needed to fill. And had we filled some of them, like again, if we had Darnell Washington instead of Brenton Strange when we're on the 1 yard line on 4th and 1 against the Titans, maybe that's the difference because Darnell Washington is such a bigger and better blocking tight end. Maybe that's the difference between us getting that 1 yard that would have sent us to the playoffs. That could have been a difference, stuff like that. That's still coming back to haunt us. And like I said, look at how good Brian Branch has been for the Lions, and we could have had him. Just needed to trade up a little bit. Wasn't asking that much. So again, all you can do is kind of look back and be like, man, that happened. But overall, I think this draft will be we'll get some more information on it as we'll see the players go. And let me know your thoughts on our draft class. And I'll get back to posting these weekly after each game. Next thing I'm gonna do is kind of a record prediction for the Jags each game. And then after that, I'm gonna talk about kind of the preseason winners and losers. But based upon this episode, I kind of talked a lot about the preseason winners and losers. So I think this will kind of be like the preseason edition of draft grades because that's where you get a chance to see those draft guys stand out. I definitely think Parker Washington made a name for himself. So did Tank Bigsby, guys that are really developing really nicely, and it's great to see. Cooper Hodges had some good blocks as a guard, and then in that first game, and then in the second game, he kind of fell off a little bit. So we'll see if he can kind of right the ship against the Falcons. Um, but overall, yeah, let me know your thoughts. And well, like I said, I'm gonna get back to doing this weekly so we can all tap in and talk about our favorite team. And remember, it was always the Jags.